Very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You're watching Beyond the Headline, and I'm Sneha Koshy. A 5-year-old girl, a child, has been allegedly raped in a village near Gwalior in Madhya Pradesh. In fact, she's not allegedly raped, she has been raped. A 5-year-old girl, a 5-year-old child. Far away from our metro cities, but a crime that is ghastly and should unsettle our very being. A 5-year-old brutally raped, her body torn apart, including her private parts. A 5-year-old, ladies and gentlemen, I'm repeating this again and again. Bite marks on her face, on genitals, multiple cuts, head smashed to the ground, raped and left to die. Or that's what possibly some thought. Found in blood-soaked state. Ladies and gentlemen, 28 stitches on her private parts. 28 stitches. If any of you as viewers have gone through even one medical stitch on your body, you would know how painful it is. I have gone through it. I know how painful it is. This is 28 stitches on the private parts of a 5-year-old child. Allegedly by a 17-year-old, a teenager who was drunk, a neighbor, so a known person, who lured the victim from a rooftop and took the 5-year-old child to an abandoned house. A 5-year-old, ladies and gentlemen. This juvenile has been arrested and is being tried as a juvenile offender because he's a minor. He's an 18-year-old. But remember, what he's been accused of is a monstrous crime. The unspeakable horror. You know what the 5-year-old told her parents? They are farmers, they are daily wages. In whatever language she could, between all the crying, she told her parents, he took me into his lap and did terrible things. So how does one decide that a minor should be treated under a law as an adult or as a minor? Remember, after the Nirbhaya case, which was 14 years ago, a lot has changed. A lot has changed, particularly legally. But who and what decides a crime as the rarest of rare? Minors should have the right to reform, and I do not take it away from them at all. Everybody must have a right to reform, a chance at life, at doing it right. But when does one draw a line, and for a crime so heinous and with just months apart from being an adult, somebody who can vote and decide on a government? Who decides whether this should be treated as a minor or an adult? What's changed legally post Nirbhaya? Let's just look at this. A 16-year-old can be tried as an adult. Non-penetrative acts is also rape. Death penalty if victim's age is less than 12 years, and minimum sentence of 10 years. And of course, fast tracking of courts. But what does this translate on ground? Do we have fast tracking of courts that deliver justice in the right sense of it all? And just how hard can it be, not only to survive a rape or a sexual assault as a child, but even in some cases, to be able to come to terms with it decades later as women? Let me just bring to your attention another incident, this one from Tamil Nadu. Ladies and gentlemen, a 3.5-year-old reportedly resisted sexual assault by a 16-year-old in Tamil Nadu's Mailaduturai. This 3.5-year-old child was lured with chocolate and taken into a secluded spot. Do you know what the collector said? The collector said the child has also misbehaved. The child spat on the boy's face. That may be the reason. So we are forced to look at both sides. The collector has been suspended. But this must force us to think yet again about how we, as trained, educated individuals and officials, look into these instances. Not the first time that statements like these have been made, but can we make a choice for this to be the last time something like this is spoken in a country like India? Ladies and gentlemen, tonight's show is going to be hard on some and triggering on others. But bear with us. This is a show that we are convinced needs to come out on air. I'm being joined right now by the victim's grandfather, the victim of a 5-year-old who's battling for her life in the hospital. This 5-year-old has got 28 stitches on her private parts. She was raped and her body, there were attempts to tear her body apart. I am not going to obviously ask the gory details from the family. Sir, namaskar. बहुत शुक्रिया हमारे साथ जुड़ने के लिए. बहुत दुआएं, बहुत प्रार्थनाएं आपकी बच्ची के लिए. पर पहला सवाल जानना चाहूंगी सर, आपकी पोती कैसी है? वो बात कर पा रही है?
नहीं तो बच्ची नहीं, अभी बात नहीं कर पा रही. वो तो कूद जा रही है, हम भी जा रहा है मम्मी पापा को, जैसे तो बता रोने लगती है और डांटन से. अभी बात क्या करे, वो छोटी सी बच्ची अभी 5वीं साल में लगी है. अभी वो क्या बोले, तो वो उसके दांत मात से और बिल्कुल नाखूनन से उसका पूरा मुंह छीन दिया था. पूरा बिल्कुल गला भी मसका उसके ओंठ मोट काट दिए दांतों से, आंखों पे सब बिल्कुल. तो उसका वो मुंह से वैसे ही नहीं बोल पा रही. उसका मुंह पूरा बिल्कुल जख्म है बिल्कुल. तो वो मुंह से वैसे नहीं बोल पा रही है कि वो क्या बोली बच्ची. वो तो अभी उसे जब पेट में अंदर दर्द होता होगा. बच्ची की अब क्या बताएं, बच्ची की ऐसी स्थिति. और उसने मारने की भी वो की उसने.
सर, आप अभी क्या कहना चाहते हैं? आप अभी आप लोगों से, सरकार से क्या कहना चाहते हैं?
अभी हम ये चाहते हैं कि बच्ची के बारे में हम ये चाहते हैं कि भाई बच्ची के लिए कुछ रियायत मिले, बच्ची के लिए कोई न्याय मिले. उस मुलजिम के लिए फांसी की सजा या अकाउंट उसका काउंटर किया जाए, उसके घर मकान तोड़े जाएं तो बच्ची के लिए रियायत मिलेगी. और दूसरी बच्ची और हैं, पड़ोस की भी है, हमारी भी बच्ची हैं, तो वे कोई स्कूल नहीं जा रही. वे सब बिल्कुल भयभीत हो गई, डरा रही, रो रही कि पापा मम्मी हम नहीं जाएंगे, हम नहीं जाए. तो मतलब गांव का मामला, तो कोई पढ़ने लिखने नहीं जा रहा है. कोई इतने पैसे वाले तो है नहीं है कि बिना 4 पहिया की गाड़ी से बच्चियों को भेज देंगे कि कर आए. अब किसान आदमी, गरीब आदमी अपने पैदर पढ़ने मरने जाती थी आंगनबाड़ी में. तो अभी सब कोई बच्ची कहीं पढ़ने भी नहीं जा रही, वे भयभीत हो रही.
जी सर, आखिरी में आपकी पोती के बारे में, पोती के तरफ से आप जो आपकी परिवार पोती के साथ है, उसकी माँ बाप उसके साथ हैं अभी अस्पताल में, आप अपने पोती के लिए क्या कहना चाहेंगे?
रिया मिले और बच्ची का ऐसा भविष्य बनाए कि बच्ची अगर को भगवान की कृपा से ठीक हो जाए तो उसके लिए कोई पढ़ने लिखने की ऐसी व्यवस्था करी जाए सरकार की तरफ से कि आप के मतलब बच्ची का जीवन सुधर सके. वो गांव में बच्ची अब नहीं रह सकती क्योंकि उस पर कलंक लग गया. उसे वो अपना जीवन कैसे गुजारेगी तो उसके लिए कोई ऐसी मकान के लिए जमीन दी जाए जिससे वो अपना पालन पोषण खुद कर सके. और उसे पढ़ाई लिखाई के लिए, क्योंकि हम तो गरीब आदमी हैं, हमारे पास कोई पैसा तो है नहीं है. अभी तो हॉस्पिटल में सरकार की तरफ से इलाज हो रहा है और हमारे लिए तो खाने कोई पैसा भी नहीं है कि हम घर पहुंच जाएं. तो रिश्तेदार लाते हैं. तो
सर, हमारे साथ जुड़ने के लिए बहुत शुक्रिया, अपना समय निकालने के लिए बहुत शुक्रिया. हमारी दुआएं, हमारी प्रार्थनाएं आपके साथ है, आपकी बच्ची के साथ है, और हम जो कर सकते हैं अपने तरफ से करेंगे. जो कानून कर सकती है, करेगी, हम कोशिश करेंगे. बहुत शुक्रिया हमारे साथ जुड़ने के लिए सर. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm being joined by Khushbu Jain, who's an advocate at the Supreme Court, Dr. Sanjeev Bagai, who's a chairperson at Nephron, and Nimisha Srivastav, who's the ED counsel to secure justice. And I'm also going to be shortly joined by Dr. Charu Vali Khanna. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining me. Dr. Bagai, allow me to come to you first. You're a doctor. Just help us understand. When we look at the surgery that this 5-year-old child has had to go, it's been a 2-hour long operation. 2-hour long operation. Large intestines cut to create an artificial anus, a urinary catheter inserted. The minor's condition is stable, but still is in critical care. I understand on television we cannot be as explicit as what this reality is. But could you just help us understand, what does this mean? What does this mean when it's a 5-year-old child on the other side?
Good evening. It's extremely distressful, and my prayers that the child recovers soon, and my entire family and the entire fraternity, medical fraternity's sympathy with the family. I mean, this is the most ferocious, heinous, and brutality of the worst type. To rape a young child is barbaric, to say the least. A vulnerable, helpless is being targeted in this manner, and it clearly deserves the maximum punishment under law. And I must add, if law needs to be amended, it should be amended. Law is there to save and protect us. If it needs tweaking, it must be done. If a boy, be it 17 or 16 or 18, is old enough to drink, old enough to rape, then he's old enough to be tried as an adult to receive the maximum punishment. Now, with regards to this girl, medically, perhaps the genitourinary tract would have been damaged so badly, bleeding, and various kinds of diversional surgeries would have been attempted so that the child's intestines function from an external port. The genitourinary tract would probably have been reconstructed. This is obviously a risk of infection, indeed viral infections from the boy, risk of post-op infections. This is going to scar the psyche of the child permanently for life. Kids don't forget these kind of incidents. And of course, it will have a huge impact later on a physical, mental growth, and indeed fertility and marriage and further prospects. Huge dent on a child's life, completely unfair. This is an epic, sinister nature, unforgivable crime. This boy should not be spared.
Dr. Sanjeev Bagai, just take us through this before I go to our legal experts, and we have them for a very, very important reason, because we by no means, I do not want anybody to even mistake that we are baying for blood or we are demanding that the 17-year-old must not be given justice. That's nowhere we are coming from. Before we get to that aspect, I want you to help us understand, whether it be a girl or a boy who's been a victim of rape, just how deep the trauma stays. In this case, we're just hoping the girl will survive. We're just hoping. But look at what the family said. I mean, that's the social aspect, and we'll get an expert to talk about that. But medical and the social aspect is not really, the trauma and social aspect is not really de-linked for that matter. You heard the grandfather says, वो कलंकित हो गई है, वो कैसे रहेगी गांव में? You know, the trauma, it's not just for the girl. Unfortunately, the society is weaved in such a way that whether a boy or a girl, it just stays.
Yes, indeed. I think the family has been traumatized for life, but unfortunately, the girl has been stigmatized for life. This child's medical prospects would be tough in the next few weeks. To reconstruct the genitourinary tract, perhaps there would have been huge amount of blood loss. The tissues would have been extremely badly damaged. A child at 5 years has very limited fluid reserves and blood reserves in the body as a capacity. So perhaps she would have suffered a lot of internal bleeding or external bleeding. To reconstruct the genitourinary tract and the intestinal tract is a cumbersome surgery. Post-op period, of course, is tough. It's going to take few weeks in the hospital, but mentally, psychologically, this child is going to have a huge scar and is going to impact her. That's why these kind of events leave a long on when a child even goes into adolescent or a young adult. We should, at the present moment, focus on her medical treatment, pray that she recovers well, and the family and the child would require a lot of ongoing psychological support for them to overcome this disastrous crime.
Dr. Sanjeev Bagai, I can't thank you enough for your time, for taking your time out to break this down medically for us to understand what it means. Thank you so much for your time. I'm also being joined at this point by Khushbu Jain, who's an advocate at the Supreme Court, and by Nimisha Srivastava, who's an ED counsel to secure justice. Both of you, thank you very much for your time. I know this is a very sensitive issue, and that's why we decided to have both of you to be able to bring out the nuances to this. Let me just start with you at this point, Khushbu Jain. This accused in this case, a 17-year-old accused, a 17-year-old teenager, is technically a minor. In this case, he's a 17.5 years old. I'm sorry to get into these nuances, but legally it matters, I'm told. So I'm just being specific about it. He's 17.5 years old, few months short of deciding whom to vote for, which government should run this country whatsoever. The crime is ghastly. Is this a rarest of rare case? The accused in this case is being treated as a minor, is being tried as a juvenile. Is that legally correct?
Okay, so when you talk about crime committed by a child or by a person who is 18 years and below is a juvenile, but the same act which you're talking about, the POCSO Act, also talks about that when it comes to age between 16 and 17, that is before 18, that period, if a crime is committed which is heinous offense, in that certain criterias, the Juvenile Justice Care and Protection of Children Act 2015 specifically allows that the child between this age group, if committed an heinous crime, including rape, then it can be tried as an adult. Now, there are some criterias and there is a procedure when I talk about that it can be tried as an adult. One criteria, heinous of crime, the rarest of rare category. When you talk about heinous crime, yes, the present case does talks about heinous crimes, and the maximum punishment in this is there in IPC. Now, how does this continue or how this works? It works that from the Juvenile Justice Board looks into the matter. When it looks into the matter, it understands, it gets into two criterias. Those two criterias are understanding the mental and the other state of it. After being understanding that entire state, it transfers the matter to the session court. Now the session court for the adults. Now, once the session court looks into it, understands that, okay, this is rarest of rare or this is heinous crime and this should be tried, the exception which is there of 16 to 17 years, between 16 to 18 years, that exception criteria to be tried as an adult fulfills. That's where if they pronounce that judgment, the person can be tried as an adult in a normal case, and the same sections like IPC or BNS for that matter, okay, which are applicable to any other adult will be applicable on them. The emphasis there also puts across that their entire emphasis should be on rehabilitation of the person who has committed the crime, because you're still talking about 16 to 18. But then they have a procedure where this can be done in heinous crimes, that it has been done in the past. When it comes to rarest of rare case, the definition is clear from the Bachchan Singh case to 2025, there has been judgment when it comes to rarest of rare cases, and there are enough and plethora of judgments which clearly makes you understand rarest of rare. And I think all of us would agree that this case in hand is rarest of rare to be saying that it's heinous or not. But then I think it has to go through the procedure that there should not be an exemption given. But under the Act, the procedure is how it is that from Juvenile Justice Board to special court decides, then it will be tried as an adult. And if not, then...
So technically, how long does this take? How long does this procedure take from a minor? I mean, I'm not talking about this case specifically. Let's not talk about this case. As I said, we are not baying for blood. We are not getting after anybody that, only this person. We're looking at the larger systemic issue in this particular case. Usually, how long will it take from a heinous crime accused minor to being arrested? Arrested is also not the right word for a minor, but I'm using it for the layman's perspective. Being sent to a juvenile home, correctional home for that matter, and to being decided that this is a heinous crime, a rarest of rare case, and a child a minor can be dealt with as an adult or tried as an adult? How long would that take usually?
See, there is a committee which is formulated, which gets into the aspect of their time is an essence over here as well, and they put a strict timeline as to 6 months or approximately a small timeline into it. But then there has to be a committee which has been formulated, which is already there to assess and determine, what is the mental and physical capacity of that specific person to commit a crime. But we are not looking less than six. We are looking approximately 6 months for it to at least come to a level where the person can be tried as an adult. Once it gets into the adult, then is where the entire trial will start, and the same manner the normal matters goes on it's gonna go. But at least the 6 months tenure for it to continue and to be decided by the special court is what I'm looking into.
Nimisha Srivastava, if I can get you in, do you agree when Ms. Khushbu Jain says that this by all means is a rarest of rare case?
Thank you, Sneha. So I would like to offer a clarification. So the rarest of rare terminology is something which is used in case law for the death penalty and not the Juvenile Justice Act. A heinous offense, yes, it does. It is one of the qualifications which can be used to try a minor, a child, as an adult. There are four, different sort of options and categories: heinous offense, mental and physical capacity to understand the consequences of the offense, and the circumstances surrounding the minor at that particular time. The Juvenile Justice Board has to look at all of these and then make a decision whether the child can be transferred to an adult court or not. Rarest of the rare is not a terminology used in juvenile justice law. This is the death penalty related thing, and death penalty, by the way, is not allowed for children in conflict with law.
No,
but
hold
yes,
it.
this is a decision for the Juvenile Justice Board to make.
Correct me.
Yes.
Isn't it correct
Yes.
that after Nirbhaya, no, hold it. I mean, we'll get to your point, but
Yeah,
since
sure.
you mentioned that legally, I think let's just get this clear out of the thing. You are saying death penalty is not a possibility, but legally after Nirbhaya, did that change? Was death penalty allowed even if victim's age is less than 12 years? Is that correct or wrong?
No, it was not allowed. Death penalty is still not allowed. Even if the victim's age is less than 12 years, for a minor, death penalty is not allowed.
Okay.
The change that came in 2015 allowed children to be tried as an adult. The maximum punishment that can be given is life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Death penalty is still not allowed. Let me add over here that
so if
Nirbhaya,
victim's
Unnao,
age is
Kathua,
less than 12 years, there can be a death penalty for the accused, but not a minor, not a minor accused.
Yes, exactly. Yes. And if I may say
so here's my question.
I
now,
think
for a layperson, Nimisha, whoever is hearing a case such as this, and I'm again and again bringing this case, but there have been umpteen cases in the past. Sometimes where the courts have ruled out that this is not a heinous crime. There are cases where the court has gone ahead and said this is a heinous crime. Now, when you hear a crime such as this, where a 17-and-a-half-year-old teenager has done what he has done. I mean, we are not saying he's convicted. We are not saying he is the convict in this case. He's accused of this. And the girl, by all medical parlance, has been raped, and that's the least that has happened to her. So that is established. Now, for it, I may have to use the word child because he's a teenager, he's a minor. A minor who can commit a crime such as this, as gory as this. How can this minor not be seen as physically or mentally incapable of doing a crime like this? Explain to us.
So I would like to here bring in the point that, I think we have been through this so many times now with Kathua, with Unnao. Every time we go into this outrage cycle where we shout death penalty, and it's brought in, the law is changed.
No, this isn't an outrage cycle. No. I'm sorry, I don't interrupt my panelists. I never interrupt my panelists, but I will not take that word, Miss Nimisha. Allow me. Give me 2 seconds. I want to clarify. This is not an outrage. This show is far from an outrage. This show is very nuanced for the benefit of the viewer to understand this is a very civil discourse, a very important conversation. This is not an outrage, but please go ahead.
Yes, so my point was that this boy is drunk and possibly was he under the influence of more heavy substances? How are our children getting access to these substances so easily? How are our communities so unsafe that someone is getting access to these things? Someone is seeing violence around all the time. A child can be taken to some place which is absolutely abandoned. Nobody is around. The community is not around to take care. And these are not isolated cases. Yes, this is extremely heinous. It's horrific. It breaks your heart. I work with child sexual abuse survivors. I know it's heartbreaking. But there are many cases, these kind of things. Violent teenagers getting access to these drugs, it's happening across the country. Speak to the communities, but we are not doing
That's
anything
true.
about
That's
this.
true. But how
This
does
will
that
keep
take it away
happening.
from the fact that this act has been done?
Yeah, it has been done. And the process should be followed. Absolutely. The law should be followed. Absolutely. But are we looking
So
at
here's the thing.
how
I mean,
this should never ever
if
happen
that teenager
again?
or
How this
no,
should
the
never ever
question
happen
is
again. And
we are seeing
these
how
kind of
and
horrific
when
things
does it get
are
decided a
happening.
teenager is to be tried as an adult. If you're telling me, are you then saying that legally it's also going to be looked into how this teenager got access to, say, liquor or any other substance? Are you then saying that's also going to be a deciding factor on whether to try him as an adult or not for the heinous crime that has happened?
The social the circumstances and the background of the child, that is what the law prescribes, is supposed to be looked at. There is another case which has also been reported of a juvenile watching a porn clip and then raping a young child. And these cases are happening. This is happening across the country. And we are not looking at these things. We are not looking at how our youngsters are exposed to so many violent things, so many addictive substances. We are not questioning our politicians about this. We let them get away with just bringing in the death penalty factor. We let everyone get away. We don't ask for
Okay,
these
okay,
solutions.
okay, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, okay. Let me just introduce at this point Dr. Charu Vali Khanna. Thank you very much for joining us. Good evening. Just allow me 2 minutes before I come to you, ma'am. Let me just go back to Khushbu Jain. Khushbu Jain, do you agree with what Nimisha Srivastav has said? Do you agree with what she said? That to see whether this is a heinous crime, you also need to see possibly about how easily a teenager accused of the crime that the teenager is should be seen about how easily this teenager could access whatever substances that teenager possibly would have consumed. Is that an important aspect of deciding whether this accused is going to be treated as a teenager, as a minor, or an adult?
Uh, See, if you talk about law, if you talk about the act, yes, these are the criteria. Because when I was talking about the mental state and the physical state of a child, would be the one which will be determining factor when it comes to referring the matter to a special court, where the special court will pass, and after looking into that criteria, will say that whether the person has to be tried as an adult or not. These are the criteria which will be looked upon. But see, we are deviating the point. Today, each and every person, adult or a child, has an access to it. Whether you have to work towards not having a child access to internet or access to, possibility of the things which are there on the internet, but you have to see the way the crime has been committed and what is, the entire modus. You look into the facts, into the case in hand. And when you look into the case in hand, you cannot just excuse that what the person was watching or what was the criteria, because whatever said done as a criteria, the way act has been done and what the girl is going through, you cannot just leave it to a 17.5. This is my personal opinion. The legal point, I have made it very clear that yes, law says this.
Okay.
But when you talk about personal opinion, Sneha, I think all of us should sink in that part that there has to be a change. Law cannot be a definite law. Law evolves with time. Law evolves with the time, with the scenarios that go on. And I think this is the change we should bring in the law.
Okay, okay. Dr. Charuvali Khanna, allow me to ask you 2-3 questions. We don't have much time, but for the 5-6 minutes that I have, let me just try take these important questions to you. One, look at what happened in Tamil Nadu today. A 3.5-year-old child, a 3.5-year-old girl, she allegedly resisted a sexual assault at her by, allegedly, I'm using the word allegedly, by a 16-year-old. And the district collector goes on to say that we are looking at both sides because a 3.5-year-old child spat at the 16-year-old. What does this say about the the place where we come from, where we as educated, trained officials. This is a district collector. He's a law enforcer. In some cases, they are the district magistrates. What does one say about it? He's, of course, suspended, but I mean, I just want a few minutes to be spent upon how poorly trained officials are.
See, you've called 3 lawyers on your panel. So rather than giving our personal opinion and playing to the galleys, we all have to speak within the law. Now, what the panelists before me said, to try the
and that's the reason why we have you.
To try the person as an adult, you have to have a preliminary inquiry which looks into the physical and mental capacity. Firstly, if we talk about the Madhya Pradesh case, the boy was inebriated. He was under some intoxication. So even if he was an adult, that will work as a defense in his favor. I'm telling you the law. That he did not know, he was not mentally capable of knowing what he was doing. Now, as far as this Tamil Nadu case is concerned, when this matter must have come to the collector, see, they have to see the circumstances. Unfortunately, we have a whole generation growing of junglis. The 14 to 16, they just don't know how to behave. They're not sensitized to society. Their whole socialization is that they can do anything and get away. So when this girl must have spat out him, they're always getting into some kind of dispute. He must have, this is the way of what they call mardangi in India, to take it out by sexually assaulting. And that's what they're watching porn, that's what they're watching in movies. And that is what the collector must have said. Now, neither that case nor this case will be considered a heinous crime enough to fall in the punishment of rarest of rare, because in both, they were not mentally capable of knowing what they were doing. And why do we have the Juvenile Justice Act? Why do we say a juvenile in conflict with law is not to be arrested, but an inquiry is conducted? Because it is assumed that children are not aware of their actions. They're not adult enough to know what they're doing, the repercussions. A child cannot even sign a contract. That is the law. So is it not the responsibility of the authorities to some way, kind of socialize them, sensitize them? Because it's not going to happen for the parents. Even our Honorable Prime Minister said, "Beto se pucho wo kya kar rahe." Parents think this is a very manly thing if my son is out and indulging in this kind of violence. So unfortunately, we talk about
no, Dr. Charivali Khanna has touched upon a very important point. Allow me few minutes. Allow me 2 minutes to I'll give you 2 minutes upon a very important point. We are talking about a victim who is right now battling for life. She's stable, but she's critical in the hospital. But here's another important point. Many times, children, and we report so many cases where children have been sexually assaulted in supposed safe spaces in schools, in their tuition classes, in their sports places, in their friends' places. And they don't know how to respond to it. If they know how to respond to it, they don't have family that supports them. These are children, these are minors, and that's what we are discussing right now. So decades later, much later, years later, when they get to know that something like this has happened, is the law strong enough to support them?
The law is never strong enough to support them, because you use the word decades later. It almost takes a decade for the case to be, it'll take quite a few years, even if it's a fast track court, it'll take 5 to 7 years to be decided at the trial court, unless there's media pressure, which happened in Nirbhaya's case, which was one of the very rare, because of the entire public pressure and media pressure, that, all the courts gave the decision. But after that, it'll go to the High Court another 5 years, and then it goes to the Supreme Court, and one doesn't know how long it'll take. So decades later, the child is very much, I'm handling cases, and similar case, like this girl who's had this whole urinary tract has been blown up, they still have the slit. The girl is 18 years old, because she'll have some scars for life. But who is supporting her? What are all the schemes for your victim compensation scheme under CRPC 357A and under BNSS? There is nothing happening on the ground level. Authorities are negligent.
Okay, let me just get in Khushbu Jain. I think Khushbu Jain wanted to make a point to what you said. Khushbu Jain, go ahead. I'll give you a minute exactly. We are short of time.
track courts with the new criminal law. Those fast track courts are specifically been dedicated for any kind of crimes against women when it comes to POXO, juvenile related stuff, which are very time sensitive, and they are being taken care of. So I think we need to stop telling people that there is nothing that can happen when you go to court. On the contrary, I would say that we need to stop victimizing
No, hold it.
Kushbu.
Spend a little time on this.
No.
Are you saying that even years later, decades later, if you are not no more a minor, you are an adult, and you realize that you have been sexually assaulted as a minor, if you go to the courts, there is strong,
Yes.
there's sensitivity enough, there's legislative backing enough, there is legal backing enough that this will be seen through in the courts?
See, I'll tell you, the law works with the aspect of when it comes to evidences. And if you're there enough to put in evidences in place, then absolutely right. If not, it will be misused by everybody and anybody in the future. So I think that's where time sensitive, no, there is no time sensitivity when it comes to filing of a cases, even after 40 years of a commission of a crime against you. There is no bar, there is no limitation when it comes to time. But when it comes to how do you bring in that nexus and you need to produce it, I think that's where that evidence part will play an important role over there. But whether you have the right, whether
What
there is
will
an
that
there
file
or not there is something which is there. But again, I would say, please let me finish the point that as a society, we need to stop victimizing the victim so that a child can feel a safe space in the society to come out and say that something like that has happened. And that child would not be put
Absolutely,
through the
very
pain.
important point.
And
Boy or a girl?
absolutely. I think everybody has to bring in that.
I think there was a panelist who was trying to speak. Who was that? Please go ahead. I couldn't see
I
that.
just want to say that 50% of the cases which come in the juvenile justice, before the juvenile justice board, they are boys on boys. Young boys on small boys. And the parents only come to know when
That's an
they
important point.
substantiated, but
Sorry.
so
Okay, Nimisha, Srivastava, go ahead.
Yes. I think the more we talk about just making more and more laws and stricter laws, we are actually negatively impacting the reporting of offenses. The more, we work in so many of these cases, it's the same community. Girls are pushed to change their testimonies in court. We do POXO trials, they take years and years. It's not, yes, in some cases, yes, it is being fast tracked, but that is not the norm. It is taking years and years. We just rely on the law constantly. The good doctor earlier was also talking about increasing punishment. We as a team have spent hours standing outside government hospitals waiting to be given entry because a victim has now collapsed because of the psychological trauma that she suffered. We are not thinking about these things. We're not thinking about
How
talking to
unfortunate.
boys about sex and sexuality and the ideas of masculinity that they had, as Ms. Khanna was talking about. We are not talking about looking at ourselves as a society. We
Okay.
are just thinking about making these laws constantly, as if that's going to change our entire society.
I think very important point. I'm totally out of time, ladies and gentlemen. Trust me, I really had so much more to ask all three of you. There's so much more, including stigma and breaking through the shackles of stigma. But we'll have to keep that for another day. Khushbu Jain, thank you very much for joining us. Nimisha Srivastava, thank you very much for joining us. Dr. Charuvali Khanna, thank you very much for joining us. Time for a short break. On the other side, we'll get you all the latest, including how must you look at the markets.